Welcome to the ADHD Mind, where I share with you interesting facts, tips, and inspirations on ADHD. Do you ever find yourself so sensitive to criticisms, no matter how constructive it is? Do you often find yourself overanalyze every person you're talking to see how they are reacting? Do you find that sometimes you don't even want to try because you're afraid you'll fail? If you're someone with ADHD, a surprising but common explanation could be RSD, which is Rejection Sensitive Dysphoria. It is one of the most overlooked symptoms of ADHD. Make sure you stick until the end of the video for a self-test to see if you experience RSD. Many of you will be surprised at how much you can relate to these questions if you have ADHD. So, what is RSD? According to ADDitude magazine, Rejection Sensitive Dysphoria (RSD) is extreme emotional sensitivity and pain triggered by the perception that a person has been rejected or criticized by important people in their life. It may also be triggered by a sense of falling short, failing to meet their own high standards or others' expectations. People with ADHD are not weak. Disapproval just hurts them much more than it hurts neurotypical people. No one likes to be rejected, criticized, or fail. But for people with RSD, these universal life experiences are much more severe than for neurotypical individuals. They are unbearable, restricting, and highly impairing. So, what triggers RSD? Rejection, the real or perceived withdrawal of love, approval, or respect. Teasing, criticism, no matter how constructive. Persistent self-criticism or negative self-talk prompted by a real or perceived failure. When this emotional response is internalized, it can imitate a full major mood disorder. The sudden change from feeling perfectly fine to feeling intensely sad inside. When this emotional response is externalized, it will look like an instantaneous rage at the person or situation responsible for causing the pain. What are the outward signs of RSD? It can be sudden emotional outbursts following real or perceived criticism or rejection. Withdrawal from social situations or avoidance of social settings in which they might fail or be criticized. For this reason, RSD is often hard to distinguish from social anxiety disorder. Low self-esteem or poor self-perception. Constant harsh and negative self-talk that leads them to become their own worst enemy. And rumination. Relationship problems, especially feeling constantly attacked and responding defensively. How RSD affects personality. Because of their sensitivity to emotional pain, people with ADHD may become people pleasers, always making sure that their friends and family, co-workers, and acquaintances approve of them. They scan every person they meet to figure out what the other person is thinking or feeling, making sure he or she is not displeased with them. After years of trying to please others, people with ADHD might lose sight of what they really want for their own life. How RSD affects behaviors. Fear of failure. Some people with ADHD find the thought of failure so painful that they refuse to try anything new. They may miss out on good opportunities or new relationships for fear of not being able to handle rejections. They tend to avoid any activities that are anxiety-provoking, such as asking someone out or passing up an exciting project or new position at work. Overachiever. Some people adapt to RSD by striving for perfection to avoid disapproval from others to compensate for low self-esteem or poor self-perception. How RSD affects relationships. It leads to more frequent arguments or fights because the person with RSD constantly feels personally attacked. So, what can we do to get over RSD? Acknowledge that it is part of the emotional dysregulation aspect of ADHD symptoms. It doesn't mean that you're too sensitive or weak or you can't handle rejections. It's just that we with ADHD experience emotions much more intensely than others. Once we can identify this as an extremely common symptom of ADHD, it will be easier for us to be more gentle and compassionate towards ourselves and find ways to overcome these intense emotions, such as through psychotherapy. Lastly, here's the RSD self-test. Please note this self-test is for informational purpose only. I include a link in the description box if you're interested in taking this self-test. Do you experience sudden, intense bouts of rage when your feelings are hurt? Do you experience sudden, intense bouts of extreme sadness when you think you have been rejected or criticized? Are you your own harshest critic? Do you feel anxious in social situations because you assume that no one likes you? Do you consider yourself a people pleaser, going above and beyond to get on someone's good side? Do you pass up opportunities or avoid starting projects because you're afraid you fail? Have you been called overly sensitive or a head case because of your strong emotional reactions? Do you dedicate more time than is necessary to a project or become perfectionistic to make sure your work has no mistakes and is above reproach? Do you ever experience your emotions as a physical sensation, as though you've been punched in the chest or physically wounded? Do you feel shame about the lack of control you have over your emotions? Before you were diagnosed with ADHD, were you told you might have a mood disorder, a borderline character disorder? Do you shy away from close friendships or romantic relationships because you worry that if people know the real you, they won't like you? Do you assume the worst in commonplace interactions, worrying you will be fired every time your boss calls you into her office, for instance? Do you think that you cannot go on feeling this way? Do you avoid meeting new people or trying new things because your fear of rejection and criticism is so strong? Have you experienced RSD before? Tell us about your experience in the comments down below. I think it is one of the most difficult symptoms to manage in ADHD. Thank you so much for watching, and please subscribe for more interesting facts, tips, and inspirations from my channel.